For decades, we've heard the same joke from physicists. Fusion energy is always 30 years away. But what if that timeline has suddenly collapsed?
The old adage or the old joke of physicists was always fusion is 30 years away, regardless of when you ask. So that's not true anymore.
Because our future depends on solving an existential challenge that grows more urgent by the day.
One large challenge that we're facing as humanity, which is that we actually need more energy. Fossil fuels put us into dependence on other, sometimes unfriendly states.
The game changer? Not just new technology, but a fundamental shift in how innovation happens.
Through AI, the ability to do much quicker R&D has massively changed the game here for deep tech.
According to Sebastian Pollok, continuing with business as usual isn't just ineffective, it's dangerous.
We can't keep on innovating in a more linear fashion. So we need fundamental innovation, entrepreneurship, quote unquote, and then hence also with fundamental investing.
His vision? A bold transatlantic alliance securing the West's technological future.
I want to see the Western world succeed. Up to a third of our investments is in the US and 2/3 is in Europe. So that we always scout the best technologies.
Can one venture firm truly bridge the gap between software speed and fusion-powered industrial revolutions? Join us as we explore how Europe's destiny hinges on the moonshot bets that merge industrial heritage with deep tech breakthroughs. Only on the European VC podcast.
Here's a few words from our beloved sponsor. Make an impact with the bank made for the innovation economy. We always take a relationship-first approach, bringing passion, dedication, and unparalleled international connections to everything we do. Our specialized, flexible solutions for founders, firms, and funds are built on deep expertise that are designed to facilitate growth and enhance your prospects for success. HSBC Innovation Banking, connecting you with what's next.
This was their finest hour.
Tear down this wall.
It's more than just an alliance. This is a union of values.
Let's start acting.
This show is not investment advice, and the hosts of this episode may be invested in the funds and companies featured.
Welcome back, everyone, to the European VC podcast. Today, I am excited because I have Sebastian Pollok with me, founding partner of Visionaries Club and Visionaries Tomorrow. And that is a vehicle that we all need to get, or a new fund in the map that we all need to get to know. So I'm super excited. Sebastian, could you maybe get everyone just introduced to what is Visionaries Tomorrow and how does it relate to Visionaries Club and some of the core stats that everyone should know?
Sure, happy to do it and super happy to be here today. Yeah, as you already mentioned, founding partner of both Visionaries Club as well as Visionaries Tomorrow. So our firm is Visionaries Club, which my co-founder Rob and I started 6 years ago. Below that firm, we now have two very different specialized funds. So one is our, say, Visionaries Club core fund, which is looking at software in the broadest sense. So B2B, SaaS, B2B AI. And then there's the Visionaries Tomorrow Fund, which I have started together with my co-founders Tong and Iris. And with that one, we're actually looking at industrial deep tech. So we are looking at the largest transformations that are affecting the physical tech stacks of the world's largest industries.
Everyone knows Visionaries Club. Let's just roughly 600 million under management, headquartered in Germany and UK, obviously Berlin and London. You're with Visionaries Club, you're focused at seed and growth stages. With Visionaries Tomorrow, it's pre-seed and seed, so there's a bit of a stage difference there. Target geography is 2/3 Europe, 1/3 US. With Visionaries Club, as you just said, B2B technology, whereas Visionaries Tomorrow is industrial deep tech, focusing on the large three industrial transformations, namely energy expansion, industrial decarbonization as one, novel materials and circularity, physical AI, and robotics. And then you have a bunch of notable investments, of course, in the B2B space, which is Bassanio, Miro, Choco, Central, TrueLayer, Pigment, Leapsum, and Hakuna. And then in Tomorrow, in this world of Tomorrow, which is, I guess, and I'm curious to hear this, but you have already made Proxima Fusion, which is one that I think many will know, Hestia, which is a drilling for naturally occurring hydrogen, Cosmic Aerospace, which is building an all-electric plane with a range of 1,000 kilometers, and Sirenopt.
And a few
There's
more.
a bunch, and a bunch more, I'm sure.
But thank you for that. That's a great pitch. Maybe I don't even have to do anything in this podcast. You just pitch us, and I
So
can
these
sit
were
back
that's
and
what
relax.
so that's the vision of EUVC, or the mission of ours, which is highlight the great people that we have building in European venture. But it's one thing to get the headlines as I just stated them. Now I want to really drill into them, and I want to ask you, like, I think there's, when we spoke the first time, you described so well, for you ended up in venture doing B2B SaaS, but your parents all herald from the academic world and building real things. And you yourself have always been incredibly excited about this. So for you, it felt like always, I want to get back to my roots. I want to get back to where I think that the real transformations are happening. Let's start with your story now, and
Sure.
then we'll progress into a lot of these structural questions about why do you choose to do it in two different fund structures and so on and so forth. But let's get this story first.
Let's do it. Yeah. So as you already mentioned, I come from a very scientific family. My parents are pharmacists. As a little kid, I already had a chem lab in the basement. And if you're the son of pharmacist, then you can put on your wish list, you can put things that no regular 8, 9, 10-year-old can put on that wish list. So I was definitely experimenting with things that are a little bit out of the ordinary. So silver nitrate, for example, is a solution, or is a substance that denatures proteins. And at one point, my mom back then, she made the big mistake of trying to clean up my experiments. So she touched my experiment, and hence her hand actually turned brown and was brown for 4 weeks because it completely denatured the proteins in kind of the outer skin layer. So yeah, that was me at the age of, I don't know when, 10 or 11 or so. I was always super fascinated with all things science and nature. And there are also embarrassing pictures of me with a weird haircut at the age of 12, sitting next to the German Minister of the Environment, having just handed over 120,000 signatures demanding a certain climate law to be passed. And then I gave Bloomberg interviews, and that was me as a little 12-year-old. So definitely I wasn't thinking of my resume or of my LinkedIn or of at one point starting Visionaries Tomorrow, but it was really what always drove me as a kid. And I was at this point that I guess all of us have found ourselves in, where I had to make a decision. Do I want to double down on that for my studies, or do I want to double down on the other big passion I've always had, which was always entrepreneurship? I didn't call it that way, but I was always the one with ideas, and then suddenly all the other kids in the neighborhood also wanted to save the white Siberian tiger, and so that was always me. And I decided to double down on this other passion, business/entrepreneurship. I didn't call it that way back then, but studied business first, and then I was on that trajectory for a while. So after my studies, I actually stayed in the US, where I had studied before, and went to Silicon Valley, was a VC at Headline, so a generalist fund, from 2010 to 2012, quite some time ago, 15 years ago. Silicon Valley was a great place to be for somebody who had just come from university. But I also felt that because I had just come from university, I had seen a startup from the inside the year prior before I started there, but that was only for a summer. And I felt I was in this position where I was supposed to give recommendation and advice to founders, and I kind of bullshitted my way through that, but it didn't feel 100% authentic, to be very true, very frank here. And hence I said, I also really wanted to start a company. So that's why I went back to Europe, to Berlin specifically, started Amorelie in the e-commerce space, grew that from 0 to a team of more than 100, turned the company profitable, and had raised some money along the way, and then sold it for 100 million in 2018 to Proxima, the large European media company. And then after a little sabbatical, joined forces with Rob. Yeah, pretty much out of my living room here in Berlin. It was just the two of us working on this concept for Visionaries Club, which we can get into in a second. And yeah, started Visionaries first as a purely software-driven fund, and then because I always like, say, more ambitious investments and more ambitious founders, and always loved this, all things coming from the science world and scientific breakthrough. So I figured with Visionaries Club, we have built such an amazing platform. We have this incredible LP base. You briefly already touched upon it, but very deep industrial access on the one hand, and then more than 45 unicorn founders on the other hand. And I think that's really great to have as a vehicle to do better software investments. But then I thought, actually, if you look at industrial deep tech, and if you also take a look at the typical founder profiles over there, where it's less the MBA type, but more, and I'm generalizing here, but less MBA type, but more, from the lab, etc. Then I thought, they actually need this value proposition even more, and also in terms of the type of topics that we invest in. We are straight at the tech stacks, the physical tech stacks of the world's largest industry. So this is really where improvement has a large effect. So yeah, that's why we decided to start Visionaries Tomorrow.
You didn't describe it much now. Rob has described it in our past pod, but one of the core missions behind Visionaries is bridging what you might call the old world, or the old world of money and the old world of entrepreneurs, with this new generation of entrepreneurs. And that's what you described also when you then said connecting deep tech entrepreneurs to this vision is almost even more important than it was with B2B software entrepreneurs. Maybe you can talk just a bit about that, because I think it's incredibly important. I think it's also a very strong unlock when it comes to understanding the role of venture, and also some of the mission that is probably well aligned with many LPs, which I think is also probably one of the secrets behind your success.
I think as Europe, we have this tremendous opportunity that we have in industrial heritage that spans such a long time, where the first car was invented here in 1875, and many other things that we now rely on, be it fertilizer, which was invented here more than 100 years ago, etc. So great industrial heritage, but then over time, this disconnect has arisen, where you have the science world, which is also doing a phenomenal job, where more than 50% of the globe's leading research institutions are in Europe, but that is its own silo a little bit. Then you have the industrialized world, and then you have startups. So what we already set out to do, Rob and me, back then, 2019, 2020, is to bridge those information asymmetries, to connect the dots, and to build those bridges between the different ecosystems. And we have started doing that on the software side, and now we are doing it on the industrial deep tech side, where we are connecting quote unquote old industry. I don't want to call it that way, but where we're connecting industry with the leading science clusters in Europe and the world, and with the entrepreneurship clusters.
You say you don't want to call it that. Because nomenclature is important, and the majority that are listening into our pods are from our industry. I think there's an important thing to double down on there when you say, I don't want to call it that. Do you find that it is unnecessarily alienating or talking down about what was there before? Do you think that it's nomenclature that we should stop using?
I think to me, it sounds backward looking, and the entrepreneurs, the family business entrepreneurs, because they're not just family business owners, but in most cases they're family business entrepreneurs. Yeah. They are amazing entrepreneurs. When you talk to them, you see this light that's coming out of their eyes, this excitement, this passion, this drive, and this energy. And they sometimes need a bit longer to make significant decisions, but once they do, and trust me, they put everything that they have besides that behind that decision, and typically that's quite a lot. And they don't shy away from very large decisions. They are fortunately in most cases, they're not bound to, we have to watch out for the next quarterly report and for the analyst conference here and analyst event there, but they typically own their companies, and their family have owned those companies. We have investors, for example, the Siemens family or the Mittal family or the Swarovski family, they're really, their only concern is the next generations, and they feel responsibility not towards some quarterly investor update if they were a publicly listed company, but they feel responsibility to the future for decades ahead. So that makes them an amazing group of entrepreneurs. So that's one why I see them very much forward driven. And the other reason is that I think there's huge opportunity for Europe to actually, we sometimes hear within Visionaries, we say, for example, this German Mittelstand thing, the traditional industries, they can be Europe's Google, quote unquote. So whereas in the US, they have the Amazon, Facebook, Google, etc. Maybe this is actually a huge opportunity for Europe. That's what we believe, to turn that industrial heritage into something that will become a driving force for the future.
I really like hearing you talk about this, and I asked you to double click on it because I once heard someone, I can't remember who said that you really gotta love your customer. And it's one thing in venture to love founders, but you really gotta also love your LP base, because you are building for them in the end also. And for that reason, I wanted to hear you talk about how you think about the Mittelstand and the passion that you describe them with, because I do think it is important, because it goes to show that it's not just people that you raise from and then send a quarterly report or something like that. You're actually very mission aligned, and you see how Visionaries fit into their whole investment strategy as an enterprising family and so on. I think that's incredibly important. All right, now let me ask you a structural question. So why did you at Visionaries decide to take Visionaries Tomorrow into its own fund structure? And that's one question. And then afterwards, I think we should also talk a bit about how does the firm operate now that you have two different funds with different focuses, and what is worthwhile in that sense?
Sure. So when Rob and I, when we discussed this internally, also with the entire team, and then also with our LPs, it became apparent that we are talking about two very different strategies. So one is a software investing strategy, which has been proven for a long time that works. We had Fund 1, which is a top quartile performing fund. Which was a 140 million fund, then raised Fund 2, 315 million. And it became apparent that it's out of different reasons that it makes sense to put this into a separate fund within Visionaries Club, so within the same firm. One being to give LPs the opportunity to decide on their allocation. So we have a large overlap in LP base, but then we also have some that really only want to invest in software. And then we also have some that really only want to invest in industrial deep tech. So that's one reason. Then two, we also knew from the get-go that this would require a specialized focused team. So my co-founders and my fellow team on the Visionaries Tomorrow side is very scientific. It's 50% PhD quota in the team. We have here is a PhD in chemistry from Utrecht and Stanford, who was head of science at Extantia for the last years and part of the investment team, and then joined Visionaries Tomorrow with Tong, my co-founder, who was Technical University of Munich, background in electrical engineering business, and then spent the last almost decade before joining forces with me for Tomorrow at Fraunhofer, Europe's largest applied research institution. He built their deep tech fund and was also responsible for the majority of their investments. And then Oscar was a PhD in nanotechnology from UCL and Imperial. He's part of the London office. Was a writer for Physics World. So that's the type of profile that we wanted to have for the Tomorrow Fund. And then last, but definitely not least, but actually most important, we also think that for founders, this is an area where you need to have a credibility as a fund, where you need to have that team and where you need to have the ability to do very deep technical underwriting for the type of companies that you're looking at and the type of opportunities that you're looking at. And you also need to be known for that in the market. Hence, we decided to have that as a separate fund within the firm Visionaries Club.
Yeah, which also, this last part that you touched on also explains to anyone listening in that you also have two outward-facing brands. So you have the Visionaries Club brand that everyone in B2B sees, and then you have the tomorrow.vc, at least domain-wise, but you also have a full baked-up website in its own.
You mentioned a couple of companies earlier. So far, we've made 7 investments. We did the first closing of the fund about a year ago. We are about to do the final closing sometime after the summer of this year. And in the meantime, it really is like building a fund again. So by now I'm used to it. I built a company, built a fund with Visionaries Club, and now I'm building another fund within Visionaries Club, which is Visionaries Tomorrow. But yeah, you need to build the team. You need to fundraise. You need to build the brand. Fortunately, we can build on everything that we've already built on the Visionaries Club side. But then at the same time, we've also done, over the course of the last 12-ish months, we've done those first 7 investments that we've done so far. You already mentioned Proxima. I think you already mentioned Cosmic Aerospace and Hestia, so the company drilling for naturally occurring hydrogen. But then EURES, for example, has spent a lot of time looking at plastics recycling while she was at Extantia. Didn't really like any of the concepts, didn't make any sense kind of economically. It was clear that those wouldn't be viable. But then we stumbled upon this company called Radical Dot, which is using a completely different chemical pathway, an oxidative pathway, to turn used plastics into green chemicals. And the ability to actually look into that and to do that underwriting, that technical underwriting, is something that we can do as a team, but that not a lot of that. I don't think that any generalist team could do. So hence, actually, the founders, they oftentimes refer to us as the tech translator for them. So we oftentimes got asked while they were still fundraising to hop on the call with investors that are interested in the company, and we then explained the tech and the intricacies of the tech to them.
That comes from you being successful B2B investors and understanding how a B2B / normal VC thinks, and then being able to say, well, I've always loved deep tech as well. I have a deep tech background. Now let me explain to you in plain English, or at least in plain VC English, why is this an opportunity that's worthwhile pursuing? I'd love to ask you, the team then, so you have the Visionaries Club. Are you situated in the same offices?
Yeah, I'm.
How much? Tell me a bit about that. Yes, beautiful behind you there. How much in the day-to-day do you do your IC meetings together? Do you have overlap in the partner group that joins in both? How do you do this? How do you make use of all the competence that's built up inside the established shop, and now you have this shop that definitely is going to operate differently and think about different things in the due diligence process, but still you really want to piggyback and make sure that you draw as many learnings as possible from Visionaries Club.
Yeah, I mean, it's great that we're able to build on top of 5-6 years of learnings from operating in the most cutthroat investing market in the world, in B2B SaaS investing, which obviously, Rob and I, we built Fund 1 together, we built the team, we made the investments together. So everything that we've built in terms of structure, shared service teams, so finance team, platform team, operations, etc., the offices, London, Berlin. But most importantly, I would say the investment process, acumen itself, the ability to go very deep in a very short amount of time, more or less regardless of topic. That is something that we are, in each team, that we're using a lot, where we continuously work on process templates, where we share the same back office infrastructure, so that all the software that we've built, all of that is shared. It's one LP base, one network, one knowledge base, etc. So it's massively helpful to a very large extent. And then you need to also massively customize. We would never be able to take the blueprint from the software world and put it on top of our industrial deep tech companies, or vice versa. That definitely doesn't work. That's why we have the different teams.
What have you learned the most What has been the biggest eye opener, or the place where you have had to make the biggest differences in how you operate in B2B SaaS to then now in deep tech?
As a B2B SaaS investor, you have at least one advantage, probably more, but one is that typically you have data and numbers quicker than on the industrial deep tech side. On the B2B SaaS side, even for a pre-seed or seed company, we could typically rely on data, on numbers, on benchmarking that then against the numbers we've already seen as part of our other DDs or looking at our portfolio companies. This is something that's harder in industrial deep tech. You have to look at science innovation. You have to look at technical roadmaps. You have to get to the core of the technological innovation on the product side, and then you have to, very similarly to the B2B side, you then have to reference that to a market demand. So in our case, as Visionaries, that means lots of interaction, lots of communication and conversations with our industrial LPs. So I would say that that's one of the biggest differences. However, on the other side, we spend a lot of time when we look at B2B SaaS companies or software companies in general. We look at total addressable market, because you have to make sure that the addressable market size is really significant enough. For the type of companies that we invest in with Visionaries Tomorrow, we also look at it. Typically, when you take a look at a Proxima Fusion, for example, and when you take a look at energy, when you take a look at Cosmic, and you look at 50% of global air traffic, at Theleron, which is a 200 billion market in energy storage, Sention, 130 billion market in green ammonia and fertilizer, or a Radical Dot, 1 trillion in the plastic space, or Hestia, also almost 1 trillion in hydrogen, then you don't the Excel calculation is not as sophisticated, and it doesn't have to be, because you're talking about massive TAMs.
How have you changed your processes? And I ask these questions because we have so many generalists that are moving into doing more deep tech. So what I'm trying to get at is, what are your core learnings around taking, the playbook of Visionaries Club to now being Visionaries Tomorrow, where you're looking at tech, where it's all about the tech risk. You've got to kind of, all the time you spent before on the numbers and on the execution risk, it's kind of here, it's more about the technology risk. It's more about the roadmap and whether you can actually meet those milestones, and then can you underwrite when you don't? What parts of your toolbox have had to really change the most? Where have you seen that, okay, now we're actually completely rethinking how we're thinking?
Deep tech companies have one big advantage, but you have to make sure that they actually do have that advantage, which is that they have when you find the right ones, they have defensible IP. So the intellectual property that's behind it is not as easily copyable as when you're doing, say, lighter tech. So that's one area where you really have to go into the technology side, the IP side. You have to make sure that you are aware of the patent and IP situation. You have to figure out what the IP strategy is going forward. So that's one area. Many areas overlap. You're looking at a team. You're looking at a problem. So you need to make sure that the problem is big enough. And same goes for the market.
Are founder characteristics the same that you look for?
We are once again looking for well-rounded teams. So we want to have a team that can operate on its own, where no fundamental puzzle piece is missing. But here, the fundamental puzzle pieces are typically different. So we have less teams that consist of only business folks or of, say, developers and business people, or just developers. But we have, if you look at our teams, take Proxima Fusion as an example, they come from the Max Planck Institute of Plasma Physics. They PhD in plasma physics, that type of background. So you need to make sure that they won't only master the tech, but they will also master the business side and the company building side of things, which in the case of Proxima, they're doing a tremendous job there.
Let's use Proxima Fusion as a case example, because I want to talk about these industrial transformational tech leaps that you're backing. And I think we probably couldn't find one that is more on everyone's radar as someone that is really making a dent, both in terms of the scale at which they're operating, but also the scale at which they were funded. So let's talk a bit about Proxima Fusion.
The thesis is that we have not only one, but at least we have one large problem that we're facing, one large challenge that we're facing as humanity, which is that we actually need more energy. And that is something that's good. So we want to get away from fossil fuels, for example, because they're not good for our future, but they also put us into dependence on other sometimes unfriendly states. So we definitely want to get away from that. And we've seen that societies prosper when they have more energy available. We need energy for our data centers, for AI, etc. The big challenge here is, how do we get more energy as humanity? So one potential answer that people have spent a lot of time on is with renewables. But for example, renewables have one big downside. They are very cyclical. So as both you and I know very well, coming from each of our parts in Europe, the sun doesn't always shine, right? So photovoltaic doesn't always work. The wind doesn't always blow. So you have large cyclicality in renewables, so, which doesn't make it suitable as a form of baseload energy. And this is what we're really after, that we have baseload energy. So from that, for example, we also then went into battery and into our storage hypothesis to at least be able to balance out the cyclicality. But since we wanted to talk about Proxima, that's another avenue that we took there. But for Proxima, they're really that ultimate answer to that big question. It's an answer that not many VCs have dared spending time with or invest in a while ago. So the old adage or the old joke of physicists was always, fusion is 30 years away, regardless of when you ask. So even if you had asked 10 years ago, it's 30 years away. If you ask today, it's 30 years ago. So that's not true anymore. In deep tech, we sometimes call it an AWS moment, where what happened to software investing and software, even more importantly, to starting a company in software through the cloud, through AWS, the needs of companies for outside funding have massively decreased. In the beginning of 2000, it was still, you needed 2-3 million. It's the numbers that I know to only get started, to buy a server, to put that somewhere, to make sure the server is running. And now it's, I think the latest numbers that I know is $30,000 is the cost to start a company on the software side. And pretty much that's happening on the deep tech side as well, where through AI and through the powers of AI, the ability to do much quicker R&D has massively changed the game here for deep tech. So a company like Proxima is now actually able to use their proprietary advantage, their background from Max Planck, from the Institute of Plasma Physics, from actually already building a scientific fusion reactor, which is working, which is the northern part of Germany, the Mittelstand 7X. So that's the team that built that. And then they spun out of the Max Planck Institute for Plasma Physics, which is the world-leading institute in this particular branch of fusion, to build Proxima Fusion. So for us, this was a perfect fit. It was a massive problem, a massive solution, the ultimate solution to this massive problem, if it works. And we knew, this is the moonshot, it still is. We saw AI as a big enabler and a big accelerator for this problem. So that made it different versus a long time ago, when it would have been less likely for this team to succeed. And then, meeting the team such a driven crew of individuals who came together to solve this. I've rarely ever seen. And then with this background of Wendelstein 7X, it's a very unique combination.
Can you tell me a bit about the deal dynamics, thinking through doing, so Proxima did 7 million pre-seed and then 20 million seed round. I have some friends in the ecosystem that are very much like, I wish we were better in Europe at taking big swings. And this is definitely one of them. And what they mean with this is, of course, let's not continue doing these 2 million, 3 million euro rounds, and like always cash strapping the companies a little bit, not giving them enough, room to just build. This is very much a different take. Tell me, how did you think through that? Both in general, how do you think? Do you think that we should do more big and bold bets in Europe, or do you think that it does require a very special opportunity and is definitely not something you want to in any way push for, unless it's because you have something like Proxima Fusion that needs that type of money at this stage?
Look, I think there are very fundamental challenges that we are facing as humanity and also as Western world. And for those, we can't keep on innovating in a more linear fashion. So we need to answer the quest for fundamental innovation, also with fundamental entrepreneurship, quote unquote, and then hence also with fundamental investing. And to me, Proxima is one of those examples where obviously we don't know yet if this is going to work. And hence I would not bet my house on it and the entire fund on it. But having a moonshot bucket within a fund like ours, and we have that moonshot bucket, which is like 10-15% of our fund will go into the Proximas and Cosmics and Hestias of the world. The idea is that you have such a big advantage as an investor if you're suddenly not playing into a bloody red ocean anymore, but you're actually playing into a lot bluer ocean. This is the essence of venture capital, that you don't only invest where everyone else is investing, but that you actually dare making those swings for the fences, that you dare being contrarian, to then be okay with write-offs in this space. You will probably be ridiculed here and there, and dude, all of us knew that fusion was not going to work. Yeah, if we can't solve breeding blankets in fusion, then fusion will not work, and 1,000 other challenges that we still need to solve. But if it works, then these are multiple fund returners on the financial side. But this is also, to me as an entrepreneur, that's what I love. I love this type of entrepreneurship. This is really what makes a dent in the universe. So this is something that I feel proud of when I can tell my kids about. And I think it's a good litmus test if you have the two. If you have multiple fund returner potential and you can tell your kids about it and they're proud of their parents.
Tell me, Sebastian, how do you think about, so you're describing 10 to 15% of your bets are reserved for moonshots like this. Could you tell me a bit about the underlying fund model behind saying we're going to reserve 10 to 15% for this type of thing? Why is it not the whole thing? And how, I'm sure there's also a timing element here.
Yeah, there is a timing element to it. In general, statistics, there was a McKinsey study last year, for example, on deep tech, say that the timing aspect is actually irrelevant, looking at traditional tech versus deep tech. So in both cases, on average, a company exits after 7 years. However, for the type of companies that we invest in on the more moonshot, on the truly moonshot side, so moonshot within deep tech, we know that this will take longer. Proxima has, to make it specific, they say 2031 is when they will have completed the alpha, the MVP facility, and in the midst of the 2030s is when they will hopefully be able to generate commercial energy. So this, it will still take another 10 years. That's one of the reasons why we said, okay, 10-15% is in this moonshot category. But we also wanted to make it probably a bit easier for LPs to swallow, that because not everyone wants to be as crazy as Moonshot, but many of them want to go beyond the typical, say, traditional tech risk return profile. They want to go, they see the advantages of deep tech, industrial deep tech, but they also appreciate the company that already has 25 paying customers, like our portfolio company, SirenOpt, and that has a product that's already live. So as always in venture, I think it's about building a portfolio that makes sense. And that's what we're doing with Visionaries Tomorrow and this type of 10, 15% in Moonshot and the other 85% and 90% in picks and shovels type of businesses like SirenOpt or drop-in improvement solutions where you don't need the type of multi-100 million, maybe even beyond that, capital requirements of a company like Proxima.
I want to ask you about another sector, which is physical AI and robotics. I come from Odense, and I've done a bunch of robotics episodes for that reason, because Odense had 2 big exits when I was active in venture. That in the robotic space, being universal robots and mobile industrial robots, big exits for a small ecosystem, so 200 million each. So tell me, physical AI and robotics, where do you see as being right now when you're looking at that space? Is it overhyped? Is it underhyped? Are investors maybe not putting their money in the right places? I hear some that are like, there's a lot of people coming in thinking that AI changes everything, but in fact, it's more of a UI thing. And unless that's where it's touching, it's not that important. That's what I hear from some. So I think we have investors in all aspects. We also have people like those on the All In podcast that are envisioning the humanoid robots in just a few years in our houses. Where do you fall in the spectrum?
We had our Visionaries Unplugged event in Paris a couple of weeks ago, where we had Eric Schmidt, Demis Hassabis from DeepMind, Dario from Anthropic, Reid Hoffman, etc., with us in Paris. And it really felt like history in the making. And you're sitting in the room while history is being made, or somebody else who I talked to from our guests described it as you felt like as Einstein was teaching and you were in an auditorium with Einstein. Yeah. And I guess, with Demis Hassabis being a Nobel Prize laureate, that was maybe not too far from the truth. We as Visionaries Tomorrow, what we focus on is applying AI to the physical world. And thinking back to Visionaries Unplugged, it confirmed in seeing that big opportunity that is arising there, where at the moment, most people when they think about AI, then they think about ChatGPT and applying AI to the virtual world. Whereas what we're doing here on the Visionaries Tomorrow side is applying AI to the physical world. Jensen Huang, the founder and CEO of NVIDIA, is quoted as saying that he sees actually a 40 trillion opportunity in doing exactly that. So applying AI to everything that moves, to warehouses, to manufacturing, etc. And that's pretty much what we're doing, where we see this big advantage for Europe with that deep industrial heritage, with the proprietary data, which is not out there, where no model has been trained on, and now using that proprietary data to train the models on doing exactly that, on helping, for example, the big OEMs, whoever is in manufacturing, become more productive in manufacturing, for example. And we see it with our portfolio companies. We see Hestia drilling for hydrogen, that they will drill for naturally occurring hydrogen. So to digest that for a second, as humanity, so far we've only drilled for natural gas and oil as we know it. By now we know we can also drill for naturally occurring hydrogen, which if you burn it, nothing is released besides water. So it's a very clean way of generating energy. And the company that we backed they come out of Google X and Stanford, and they are pretty much taking the 100+ years of data coming from oil and gas to now train their models on forecasting where to best explore for naturally occurring hydrogen. And then they're also developing sensors to then take initial measurements and train the model even further. And then at some point they will say, okay, now let's drill. But right now they actually, we cluster them into our moonshot bucket, which could mean, hey, very CapEx heavy, etc. But right now they're pretty much an AI company. So lots of things are happening on that side of physical AI.
Are we going to have robots walking around our houses in the next 5 years?
As you know, humans are really bad at forecasting the future, and we always think too linearly about the future. So if both you and I, if we force ourselves to exponentially think ahead, then the answer has to be yes. But do you want that? Do I want that? I don't know. Let's see if they, they take care of some of the stuff that neither you nor I want to do, then why not?
That's the only question anyone ever wants to know when we talk about robotics and physical AI, of course.
Oh, that's funny.
No, I want to ask you then, just want to touch really quick on novel materials and circularity, because we spoke about physical AI and robotics and the energy expansion a little bit as well. So now novel materials and circularity, tell me, what does that encompass for you? What does that mean? How is it different from other parts of the deep tech space? Why do you think this is a place to focus?
So once again, I think there are different reasons to focus on this. One is coming from what can we do now, having all the capabilities that we have as humanity? When you go from, now I'm talking novel materials, when you go from everything had to be done in vitro, so in the physical world, you needed to have a lab, you needed to have your experimentation setup, super costly. You needed either humans or some form of robots to do those experiments, to try to come up with novel materials with better properties. Going from that paradigm to now a vivo to in silico. So doing those experiments in the virtual world. Training models to give you a forecast on what an outcome of an experiment would be, to then only do the experiments that you really want to do in the physical world. That's a huge game changer. So that's one of the reasons why we're interested in it. Then the second part is it depends on your nomenclature, synthetic biology, tech bio, whatever you want to call it. So looking at nature and the capabilities of nature, of bacteria, for example, and then using those capabilities, modifying the capabilities a little bit to then produce materials, outputs that you want to produce, which could have completely different properties or will be much easier to produce using this biomanufacturing, quote unquote. So these are just two large topic areas that are massively pushing the novel materials and circularity aspect forward. And then to round up the attractivity of the sector, once again, more from a global and also more from a geopolitical point of view, the more we can engineer materials that don't require components that come from more unfriendly parts of the world, the better for us as Western world, the better for us as Europe. The more you can keep those rare earth, for example, rare earth metals in a circular environment, so you can reuse them, the less dependency you once again have. So these are large trends on the technological side, coupled with a large need on the geopolitical side that make this so interesting. Hence, this is to us, one of the three large transformations that we're seeing, which hopefully will make sure that, right now as Europe, we have a large dependency, for example, on China when it comes to rare earth minerals, where 99% of those are actually coming from China. So we want to get away from that as quickly as possible.
I have a suggestion, which is the European Union should take over Greenland, since apparently Denmark is not going to be allowed to keep it anymore. I want to ask you one final question, and that is on this line of thinking that you had here in the end, which is European sovereignty. And I just wanted to ask you, because I imagine, given your name and how you think and so on, that there is a strong European sovereignty line behind your thinking when it comes to Visionaries Tomorrow. Could you talk a bit about that?
So first of all, I would call myself a Western world fan. I've always loved the US. I've loved Europe. I am a European, cumulatively spent 5 years or so living in the US. I don't want to see ourselves being taken over by autocratic regimes. And I also want to make sure that as Western democratic countries and continents, we can also show that we're capable of performing on the same level or even overperforming other countries with a less democratic regime. That's something that's definitely driving me. And I'm also obviously aware of what's currently going on in the US and what that also means for Europe. To me, first of all, we're talking about the next 4 years. So I think these will be difficult 4 years. But as always, and I'm an optimist and I'm an entrepreneur, so I would say, never miss a good crisis. And we can already see the positive effects that it has on Europe. I've never seen so much momentum and energy and countries and people coming together to actually to strengthen up and to actually be one of the large players in the global arena. I think that this is what became quite apparent, that we need to be that on the entrepreneurial side, on the economic side, political side, military side. I want to see the Western world succeed, and that definitely includes the US. Hence, we also invest in the US. Up to 1/3 of our investments is in the US, and 2/3 is in Europe. So we need to make sure that we always scout the best technologies, whether they're in Europe or in the US. And sometimes, you alluded to this, I think, a little bit, sometimes the aspect of European continental sovereignty obviously also plays a role. It's great to see a company like Proxima be in Europe and in Germany, where for once we have actually spent 10 plus years and 1.5 billion as a German state on developing this technology. And now it's world leading. So within this branch of fusion, what they're doing, the stellarator design, is actually, there is no other design in the world that's better. There's no other company in the world that's better. So let's make sure that we play that strength.
Could not agree more. Sebastian, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today.
Thank you. It's really great.
Here's a few words from our beloved sponsor. Make an impact with the bank made for the innovation economy. We always take a relationship-first approach, bringing passion, dedication, and unparalleled international connections to everything we do. Our specialized, flexible solutions for founders, firms, and funds are built on deep expertise that are designed to facilitate growth and enhance your prospects for success. HSBC Innovation Banking, connecting you with what's next.
This was their finest hour.
Tear down this wall.
It's more than just an alliance. This is a union of values.
Let's start acting.